Imagine for a moment you're in 2006. Your phone has a tiny screen, physical keys that you press until your fingers hurt. And if you want to send a text message, you have to press the 2 key 3 times just to write the letter C. Now close your eyes and think. In just 365 days, all of this would change forever. A single 90-minute presentation would not only transform the technology industry, but completely change how human beings relate to the digital world. This is the story of how a company that was almost bankrupt in the 90s managed to create the most revolutionary device of the last 50 years. A story full of industrial secrets, canceled projects, and a billion-dollar bet that almost didn't work out. You're going to discover today the behind the scenes of one of the greatest technological revolutions in human history. And at the end, you'll understand why what happened in January 2007 wasn't just the launch of a product, but the birth of a new era of humanity. To understand this revolution, we need to go back to 2004. At this moment, a major technology company known for its colorful computers and music players was facing a dilemma. Its executives realized something frightening. Other manufacturers were starting to add music functionality to cell phones. It was like watching an enemy approach in slow motion. They knew that eventually, someone would create a phone so good for listening to music that it would make their famous portable players obsolete. The question wasn't if this would happen, but when. That's when a bold decision was made. Instead of waiting to be attacked, they would attack first, but not with just any phone. They would create a device that wouldn't just play music, but would completely reinvent the concept of a cell phone. The project received an internal code name, Project Purple. It was so secret that only a few dozen people in the company knew of its existence. Employees selected to work on the project had to undergo rigorous security checks and sign confidentiality agreements that could ruin their careers if broken. But here's the first obstacle. How do you create a revolutionary phone when your company has never manufactured a phone in its life? It was like deciding to climb Mount Everest without ever having gone on a hike. The answer came from an unusual strategy. Instead of trying to compete with phone giants using the same rules, they decided to completely change the rules of the game. While all manufacturers focused on adding more buttons, more functions, and more complexity, this company had a radical idea. What if we removed almost all the buttons? In 2004, suggesting a phone without a physical keyboard sounded like madness. It was like proposing a car without a steering wheel. All industry experts agreed. People needed to feel buttons under their fingers to type. How could someone write messages or dial numbers on a smooth surface? But there was an even bigger technical problem. The touchscreens of that era were primitive. They only worked with a stylus, an awkward plastic pen. And even then, they were imprecise, slow, and frustrating to use. Creating a screen that would respond to human finger touches with precision was considered technically impossible by most engineers. This is where the magic began to happen. A small group of extremely talented engineers was gathered in a secret room. They received an apparently impossible mission: create a glass screen that would be more responsive than any physical keyboard ever created. For months, these engineers worked 16 hours a day. They tested hundreds of different materials. They experimented with dozens of sensor technologies. They failed thousands of times. But slowly, very slowly, they began to create something magical. The first functional prototype was the size of a table. It had wires coming out everywhere, exposed electronic boards, and made a deafening noise. But when fingers touched that experimental screen, something incredible happened. The glass responded instantly, with a precision no one had seen before. At that moment, everyone in the room knew they had broken one of the greatest technological barriers of the time. But transforming that electronic monster the size of a table into something that would fit in a pocket would be another gigantic challenge. While engineers worked on screen technology, another group faced an equally complex problem: how to make a phone work without buttons. How would people navigate through menus? How would they dial numbers? How would they write messages? The solution came from a revolutionary insight. Instead of trying to replicate physical buttons on the screen, they decided to completely reinvent the interface. They created something that had never existed before: a system where you could touch directly on what you wanted to do. Want to call someone? Touch the person's name. Want to read a message? Touch the message. Want to enlarge a photo? Use 2 fingers to stretch it. It was so intuitive that a 3-year-old child could use it without instruction. But developing this interface cost more than 2 years of intense work. Every gesture, every animation, every transition was tested hundreds of times. The team knew that if the system wasn't absolutely perfect, people would reject the idea of a phone without buttons. In parallel, an unexpected discovery completely changed the project's direction. The company realized it could use a miniaturized version of its computer's operating system as the phone's brain. This meant that, for the first time in history, a cell phone could run complex applications, truly browse the internet, and do things that were previously only possible on computers. It was like putting an entire desktop computer inside a device the size of a deck of cards. In 2005, this seemed like science fiction, but the more the project advanced, the more costs rose. Developing the necessary technologies was costing billions of dollars. Every month, investors questioned whether it wouldn't be better to cancel everything and focus on safer and more profitable products. The pressure was immense. If the project failed, it could break the company. But if it worked, it would change the world forever. In mid-2006, finally, the first truly functional prototype was ready. It was an elegant rectangle of glass and metal, with a screen that occupied almost the entire front surface. When you touched the screen, it responded instantly. When you slid your finger, the content moved smoothly, as if it were physical. For the first time in history, someone held in their hands a truly personal and portable computer, disguised as a phone. But even with the prototype working, the biggest challenge of all remained: how to convince the world that it needed something it didn't even know it wanted. In 2007, the cell phone market was dominated by a few gigantic companies. They sold tens of millions of devices per year and had established relationships with all the operators in the world. How could a company that was new to the phone market compete with these titans? The strategy was bold and risky. Instead of trying to convince traditional operators to bet on an untested product, they went directly to the country's largest operator and made an irrefutable proposal. You'll have total exclusivity over the most revolutionary device ever created. But in exchange, you need to give us total control over the user experience. It was an unprecedented proposal. Traditionally, operators control which applications came installed on phones, how interfaces worked, and even which features users could access. But this time, they would have to accept a completely finished product, without being able to change it. The negotiations lasted months. There were moments when it seemed the deal wouldn't happen. But finally, in December 2006, the contract was signed. The launch was scheduled for January 2007. Now comes the most tense part of this entire story. In the weeks leading up to the launch, the prototype still had serious problems. The battery lasted only a few hours. The software crashed constantly. The internet connection was unstable. The team worked day and night, literally sleeping in the office, to solve the last bugs. It was a race against time. In a few weeks, they would have to present to the world a product that still didn't work perfectly. And then the day came. January 9th, 2007. A theater in San Francisco was rented for a special presentation. Hundreds of journalists, investors, and industry executives gathered, not knowing exactly what they were going to see. The presenter took the stage and began with a phrase that would go down in history. Today, we're going to introduce 3 revolutionary products: a widescreen iPod with touch controls, a revolutionary mobile communications device, and a breakthrough internet communications device. These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device, and we are calling it iPhone. In the next 90 minutes, the world watched a demonstration that would change everything. For the first time, they saw someone navigate the real internet on a phone. They saw photos being enlarged with a simple finger gesture. They saw an interface so intuitive it seemed magical. But the most impressive thing wasn't the technology itself. It was people's reaction. In the final seconds of the presentation, you could hear absolute silence in the auditorium, and then an explosion of applause that lasted minutes. At that moment, everyone understood they had just witnessed the birth of a new era. But here's what few people know. Even after this historic presentation, many experts predicted the product would be a failure. They said it was too expensive, too complicated, that people would never abandon their physical keyboards. Business Week magazine published an article titled, "Apple's iPhone Could Be a Failure." Famous analysts predicted sales of only a few thousand units. Some executives from rival companies publicly laughed at the idea. They were about to be brutally surprised. When sales began in June 2007, something unprecedented happened. Lines of hundreds of people formed in front of stores. People camped on sidewalks for entire days just to guarantee a unit. In 30 hours, more devices were sold than many experts predicted for the entire year. But the real impact would only be perceived in the following months. Other manufacturers immediately realized their products had become obsolete overnight. It was as if they were still selling carriages while someone had just invented the automobile. Within months, all major phone companies canceled their projects and development and began creating copies of the iPhone. The design of virtually every cell phone changed to imitate the new creation. But the real revolution wasn't just technological, it was behavioral. For the first time in history, people had instant access to all the world's information at any time, anywhere. This fundamentally changed how we relate, how we work, how we have fun, and even how we think. It created entire industries that didn't exist before. It transformed photography, music, commerce, communication. Think about it. Today, a 10-year-old child carries in their pocket more computational power than NASA used to put man on the moon, and uses it to watch cat videos. This revolution also had unexpected consequences. It changed how we relate socially. It created new forms of anxiety and dependency. It transformed politics, journalism, and even the way our brains process information. In the years following the launch, billions of people around the world adopted this technology. Entire societies transformed. Economies were created and destroyed. The smartphone became the most important tool of modern civilization. And it all started with a simple question in 2004. What if we create a phone that was also a computer? Today, 17 years later, it's hard to imagine the world without smartphones. They become extensions of our brains, keepers of our memories, and windows to human knowledge. They've changed society more in the last 15 years than any invention of the previous 50 years. But here's the deepest reflection of this entire story. The greatest technological revolution of our era didn't happen because someone invented something completely new. It happened because someone had the courage to reimagine how things could be different. All the technologies necessary to create the iPhone already existed in 2004. Touchscreens, mobile processors, wireless connection, digital cameras. What didn't exist was a vision to combine them in a revolutionary way. And this leads us to the most important question. What other aspects of our lives could be completely transformed if someone had the courage to reimagine them today? Maybe the next revolution that will change the world forever is being developed at this exact moment, in some secret laboratory, by a group of people who refuse to accept that things need to continue being as they always were. The iPhone story teaches us that the future isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create when we have the audacity to question the present and the determination to build something better. And you? What revolution will you create in your life, in your work, in your community? Because if there's something this story proves, it's that a single courageous idea can change everything. The iPhone wasn't just a product. It was proof that the impossible is just a matter of perspective, and that any person with enough vision and courage to act can rewrite the rules of the world.